Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are reading through Mark 9. The chapter opens with Jesus alluding to his transfiguration with the statement of, "Shall not taste of death till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power." 6 days later, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him to a high mountain, and he was transfigured before them, his clothes shiny and bright white, along with Moses and Elijah. The study Bible here makes sure to mention that Elijah is actually John the Baptist. Peter goes to Jesus at this point and says he'll make 3 tabernacles because he's not sure what else to say or do in that moment because they're so afraid. They're then overshadowed by a cloud in that moment and hear, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." And Jesus is all that remains. He tells them to tell no one of what they have seen until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. Peter, James, and John don't fully understand what he means by this, and they ask each other about it. They then ask Jesus why the scribes say that Elijah must come first. He responds that Elijah must come to restore all things, and the Son of Man will suffer many things. Then he says Elijah did come and have done unto him what was listed, as it was written of him. The study Bible points out here that Elijah is indeed John the Baptist, that Peter's being sore afraid was used only one other time, and it's in Hebrews when Moses trembled at God's full disclosure on Mount Sinai. Peter, James, John, and Jesus then return to the other disciples and find a mass of people and the scribes questioning the 9 disciples that stayed behind. Jesus asks what is being asked of the 9 and is then interrupted by a man whose son is possessed of a demon that his disciples cannot cast out. Jesus states to the disciples and the man, "O faithless generation, how long will I suffer you?" He then orders the son to be brought to him. They go back and forth on his condition, and ultimately the father is in undeniable turmoil in his doubt because of the worry over his son. And Jesus says, "All things are possible to him that believeth." He heals the boy. People say he is then dead, and Jesus takes his hand and the boy rises. Later, the disciples ask Jesus why they couldn't heal him themselves, and Jesus states that it's a lifestyle of fasting and prayer built up to have enough spiritual power to do so. They go to Galilee, and Jesus says, "Tell no one, for the Son of Man will be delivered and killed and rise 3 days later." Disciples, again, do not fully understand, and they are afraid to ask. Jesus later asks the disciples what they were talking about earlier and says, "If you want to be the first, you must be last, the one that helps the others, the servant." It is written that Jesus then takes a child in his lap and says, "Whoever receives a child receives not Jesus, but the one who sent Jesus." John tells Jesus about the man performing miracles in his name, and Jesus says to leave him alone, that if he believes in Jesus that much, even without fully knowing him, there is nothing bad that he can say of Jesus. He's on our side. He continues to say that if someone gives you a drink of water in his name, they will be rewarded. That if someone harms a little one that believes in him, it would be better for him if he had a millstone tied around his waist and tossed in the sea. If you have something that offends thee, like you can't control it, then cut it off in order to save your soul from the fires of hell. This expresses how serious this is by saying the fire is not quenched 3 times. He talks about salt, salted with fire. Believers will be tested, and we should have salt in ourselves, or we should have the distinctive quality that makes a person devoted to God. All right, everybody, so that concludes the study portion of Mark 9. Some emotions that I had noticed throughout this chapter were when the disciples were afraid to ask Jesus further about his statements. I think that we've all felt a time or two that we haven't fully understood a concept that's being taught to us, and we're afraid that our question is too dumb of a question to ask out loud, so we don't. And I can totally resonate with the disciples on this and their emotions as they continue to walk their path with Jesus. Another time that I saw that was quite emotional was when Jesus and Peter, James, and John return to the other disciples, and he gets frustrated and says, "Oh, faithless generation, how long will I suffer you?" You can see how wildly emotional that Jesus really is. And I think it just helps us as later generations that are reading and learning and traveling our path. It helps us to reflect and be able to resonate with him on his path. The last emotional scene that I wanted to talk about was when Jesus takes the child into his lap. His words are definitely very important here, but also the action itself of holding a child. When you are exhausted and you pick a child up and you get a quick baby hug, somehow it recharges your batteries. I don't know how to explain it. It makes it worth it, and it helps you keep going. So I think at that point, Jesus is physically and mentally exhausted, and I think the act of him picking up a child was him also recharging his batteries a little bit. So I thought that was cool, and I wouldn't have known that unless I had gone through parenthood myself. So I guess taking this part of my journey has, again, helped me reflect more so with Jesus on his journey. All right, everybody, that's all I have for Mark 9. We've been quickly moving through Mark. There's only 16 chapters, so as we move into Mark 10, we are quickly getting into the thick of the gospel, so I'm excited to go through it with you guys. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope that you comment and like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you next time. Thanks very much, everybody.